Welcome to another update. In this one, I'll be covering the latest updates from the front line, starting out in the south of Orikhiv, where here the Ukrainian forces continue their attacks in the direction of Robotyne, where here they are still unable to advance since the 14th of July, which is now 6 days ago. Every day since then, the Ukrainians have launched multiple armored attacks against the village of Robotyne and the Russian defensive positions in this area, as the Ukrainian forces try to break through these positions and capture the village, but so far they are unable to achieve success, as every time they launch an attack, they send their tanks and armored vehicle, they dismount those vehicles, they spread around by the forest lines, and the Russian artillery and air force continuously bombard these positions, as well as the mines being laid there ahead of time. Makes it very difficult for the Ukrainians to break through these positions, and they hardly ever even get to confront the Russian forces, as Russian forces are just behind the lines, using mainly artillery and the air force to attack the Ukrainian positions. However, the past few days have been specifically hard, especially in the southern front by Zaporizhia, but also by Bakhmut as well, as Ukrainian forces continuously attempt to advance, but in the end they have not managed to do so for a while now. We've constantly heard about how the Ukrainians consistently adapt and change tactics to adapt to how the Russians are defending, to try and improve and gain further territories. Well, we can already see here today is the 20th of July, and if we take a comparison to how much the Ukrainians have advanced through this month in comparison to the last months, is significantly less. And we've even seen the Russians try to take back some territories around the areas. We've seen them take back some southeast of Gulyaipole, to the northern flank of Berivka. They have managed to recapture some lost positions to the south of it. So generally, the Ukrainian forces continuously try to advance essentially every day, but the Russian forces are also adapting their own tactics so that they are even better than what they are currently. So every time the Ukrainians attack, they know what went wrong and they adapt compared to that. But the Russians also see the same battle and experience the same battle, which also allows them to improve and adapt. For example, we've heard a lot about the Ka-52 helicopters. Now the Russians started out using the Ka-52 helicopters in pairs. Now they have added to these helicopter squadrons 3 other helicopters, the Mi-8 and Mi-29 helicopters as well. So now it is a 3 different type helicopter grouping with about 4 to 6 helicopters working together. So the firepower and the tactics, as well as the capabilities of these attack groups by the helicopters, have significantly improved compared to when this Ukrainian offensive started. So while the Ukrainians are adapting, so are the Russians. And as we can see through the view that we have on our own chairs in our own homes from the videos that is available, we can see that the information that comes to us indicates that the Russians are improving at a faster rate than the Ukrainians are. The Russians are able to adapt faster. They are able to take further advantages, since they already have an advantage, which then allows them to make more use of this advantage. Let's do it in a mathematical analogy. If we essentially say Ukraine has 100% firepower, if they improve by 10%, they would have 110%. If the Russian forces have 700% firepower because they have the 7-1 advantage, then they improve by 10%, that's 770%. So they still have this 7-1 advantage, but the sheer number is so much higher than that of the Ukrainians, which makes it to a point where essentially it is too devastating in pure numbers. Which brings us to this article where they essentially talk with a US veteran, and he is stationed and working to train Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine, and he says and claims that compared to last month, the amount of casualties on the Ukrainian side today is 3 times as many as it was last month. So essentially, the Ukrainians are now taking heavy casualties doing this offensive, and they are not progressing as much as they need to with these casualties. These casualties are at a point where when you're taking these casualties and you're not gaining ground, when your objective is to gain ground, then you're failing at that objective because you're taking losses at a rate that you cannot sustain, and meanwhile you're not achieving your objective. And to get an example of this, we have these videos here. First we have from the Remevsky Ledge area, where we first have this video of a Russian helicopter attacking, advancing Ukrainian tanks by the Remevsky Ledge area. As for the Uledar area, here the Ukrainian forces also attempted to make some sort of advance in this area, and here we see the same. The Russians are showing that they are very capable of defending their positions, as they have continuously, whenever the Ukrainian forces attack, just have the same results everywhere. And the Ukrainian forces still are running with this weird tactic of sending small columns of 2 tanks and 2 BMPs just to test the waters, essentially. And now we see this video here. There's 3 tanks and 2 BMPs lost in this part of the front line by Uledar. And even if we move to the Bakhmut front, where the Ukrainians have had the most success in this month, we still see the same videos of Ukrainian tanks in small numbers, 2 to 4, including armored vehicles, trying to launch these small-scale assaults and just getting hammered by Russian artillery as they try to advance, but essentially they just end up getting destroyed by the Russian artillery and minefields, as they cannot advance through these defenses, even though this area by Bakhmut is much less defended than the Zaporizhia front. They've still prepared some sort of defenses since the capture of the city now 2 months ago. So what we are seeing is that the battle of attrition continues in the whole front line, all the way from Zaporizhia to Bakhmut. And the Russian forces are doing some small offensive operations themselves. They have seen areas where they have had little to no success, or even major failures, like to the northwest of Kamyanka. And then we have seen other areas where they've had some success, like to the south of Krasnohorivka, north of Marinka. But generally, we're seeing them doing much less offensive operations than the Ukrainians are currently. And the Ukrainians are essentially suffering the same losses as the Russians are, but 10 times worse, because they are launching 10 times as many. And the Russian forces, when they are defending, are essentially not even making contact with the Ukrainian forces, as they just use their air force, artillery and minefields to destroy the advancing Ukrainian forces. And meanwhile, while this battle of attrition continues and the Ukrainian forces are taking heavy losses, the Russian forces are preparing troops in the Luhansk area, where, as I mentioned, 100,000 troops, over 900 tanks, most likely more than 1,000. And then in Belarus, the Wagner forces are gathering a lot of forces. They're training Belarusian soldiers, and Russian soldiers also going into the country. So there's a large buildup of Russian troops in both the south and the north, all while Ukraine is essentially depleting its own offensive capabilities by launching attack after attack in the Zaporizhia front and in the Bakhmut front. And in the end, they're essentially showing little to no results for it. So this is just very weird that they're going at it like this. It's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Of course, this isn't exactly the same, but the way they're changing the situation, the way they're changing their tactics, the amount of troops they're using, it's too small of a difference for it to actually make a difference. They're essentially doing the same thing over and over again. You can't go through a minefield while the opponent has 7-1 firepower and has an air force and you don't. It's just not going to work out, as we see. And that is why I predicted prior to this offensive, it's not going to succeed when the Ukrainians don't have the necessary firepower and don't have an air force.
This is an African reaction. I hope you enjoy. Sorry, my home is draining, so hope to see you on my channel next time. Thank you. Have a blessed day. Bye.